Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Well, we will call our meeting to order, and we have here in the room Guy, Roland, Drew, Craig, Jonathan, and me. And on the screen, we have Harriet, Graham, and Stephanie. And our guest here is Craig Cobb tonight. So we do have a quorum in the room. So why don't we go around the table to be sure that Craig knows everybody.
Hi, I'm Guy Fellion, and I live on Bellwood by the neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Roland Anglin, and I live on Scarborough.
Drew Herzig, I'm on Bradford.
Harriet?
Harriet Applegate, Crest Road.
I'm Graham, I live on Bradford.
I'm Stephanie. I live on Scarborough.
Jonathan Ciesla, I live on Scarborough.
Craig Quigley, I live on Stillman.
And Discovery, I live in Delamere. So welcome, Craig. We appreciate you coming in to visit with us this evening. So the purpose of the survey and having you come talk to us tonight is just so that we can get your thoughts on some of the charter provisions that we should be focusing on, some things that you might want changed or things that aren't in the charter and perhaps should be in the charter. So you did respond to the survey and you listed some things that were of concern to you, but I guess I'd like to ask you to sort of just pick out 2 or 3 of the ones that you think are most important, and we can cover those first.
Well, let's start with the easy one, which is to take care of the grammatical and technical changes that need to be done to the charter.
Right. I should tell you that we've gone through the entire 2019 charter and found that it had a lot of very good work in it, including the gender neutral language and the updating language and the granular changes to things like the referendums and initiatives. So we're inclined to adopt all of that.
And I sat on that prior charter review and I had to go back and look at our report. And some of the things I admittedly forgot. And I'm sitting here looking at my responses. And I don't know that I was particularly in favor of any significant or substantive changes. I think most of my responses were in opposition to some things that have been discussed and proposed in the past. And I still believe that it is, other than making these technical and non-substantive changes, I still feel that it is too soon into this new form of government to make substantive changes until we fully understand how this is going to work out and how the personalities and the philosophies of the people that comprise this government, how that needs to get sorted out, in my opinion. I think we rushed, frankly, to have a charter review. But that was done in response to some people believing that we needed a charter review provision compelling department heads and city employees to come to city council meetings or committee meetings, and I believe to placate some council members, we went ahead and decided to have this charter review commission. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone has said that before, but that's my perception of how this all came about.
I have not heard that before, so that is interesting.
Craig, I'm wondering, because my perception was major dysfunction, pull cord to stop train, basically charter review commission kind of thing. I'm worried, though, that if we don't have an intervention of some sort, we'll have 2 more years of oppositional government. What are your thoughts on? Do you think things are going to shake down eventually?
Yes, I do. This is an ongoing process on both the part of the administration and city council, and I believe that as people acquire more experience and more understanding of this government and how it works and the nuts and bolts of the government and get to know who the department heads and the directors, I believe that we will get there. But it's going to take some time. And it is when people say, you know, this government is dysfunctional, I just imagine you did a startup business and you hired a CEO that had not run a large enterprise organization, and you gathered a board of directors. None of them had any significant experience in the corporate world or this business, and then you turned over, in essence, you know, $110 million company and said, run with it. Certainly, there are going to be some hiccups.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the people getting to know directors, because one of the things that we have gotten comments on, and one of the things that I've heard people in the community comment on, is that there doesn't seem to yet be sufficient collaboration between the city staff and city council members, and that many city council members aren't really given the latitude to get to know directors. They don't really have the latitude to talk to them, or they don't necessarily get responses when they ask people to come to their meetings. So they're not really given an opportunity to build a relationship with directors. So what has your experience been in that regard?
I've seen that improving. I can't speak for anyone but myself, and I might have been in a different position, having been the vice president and having had more access to the mayor and the city administrator by virtue of sitting in on weekly meetings. But if it's a question of access, changing the city charter is not going to make a difference if the mayor or the department heads or the directors don't want to be accommodating to the city council members.
I guess we have had a little bit of conversation, and you know, others could certainly chime in on this, but we've had a little bit of conversation about the extent to which a charter is the right place to try to address access issues. And it's a little tricky, I think, to try to come up with ways that you could appropriately deal with that in the charter, because a lot of it is very granular, and it doesn't seem like it's the charter doesn't seem like the right tool to use. But at the same time, it is kind of startling to me that if the charter were to say, for instance, that upon request, directors will come to city council meetings or come to committee meetings, what you're suggesting is they won't cooperate with that anyway.
Well, no, that's
kind of surprising.
I'm not suggesting that that is what is happening. I'm suggesting that is what could happen if you had a rule. So to me, it doesn't matter whether there's a charter provision or a city ordinance that says that this must occur. What are the consequences if it doesn't, or an employee or a director attends the meeting but isn't cooperative or forthcoming with information?
Well, it's interesting to me that other cities apparently do have their directors come to meetings. And I honestly don't know how it works out in those cities. But it used to be the case in Cleveland Heights that directors came to meetings. So it's not a revolutionary concept. But I think the bigger issue to me isn't necessarily whether they come to the city council meetings, because we all acknowledge that if someone's trying to, if a city council person is trying to develop legislation, or they're trying to get a better understanding of how a department is operating because they're getting resident complaints about it, you want to have that communication outside of a city council meeting, I would think. It's a more productive way to address it. But if you aren't allowed to have that communication, I'm not sure I understand how that happens in a productive way in the best interest of the city and its residents. Because I'm assuming good faith on everybody's part.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, it's, you know, all the rules in the world, so does want to follow. If there's not cooperation, you won't get it. So that's kind of in a nutshell, but I get that perspective, like, you can't force someone's hand to work together. You can make it hard, you can make it difficult, you can put provisions, but, you know, it's amazing how much stuff does not happen in the world.
Right.
So force may not be the issue through the charter, but at the same time, I know some of the discussions we're having is, okay, the charter shouldn't be so granular maybe and say, and list every department and say those have to come to the meeting, but there might be a general one for council to make a rule if they want, or like to look at the higher level pieces where is the charter giving both council, the mayor, and the citizens to some degree enough mechanisms to do different things so that it can be functional. Because I know, for instance, when the mayoral stuff was put in, that was cut and paste, and the whole charter wasn't gone through to integrate it and make it smooth. So there are some opportunities for that smoothing. And at the same time, look for, does everybody have the tools they need to do their job?
And what I'm saying is that you're not gonna legislate by ordinance or charter the level of cooperation or information gathering that some council members believe that they need in the absence of cooperation from the department heads or the administration.
I think that makes sense.
I'm trying to figure out, without asking you to get too personal, is it expectations that are maybe too much, or is it resistance from the administration, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, I only know what other council members have told me and what has been circulated out in the public about the inability to get information or to have conversations with department heads or directors. Having been on council under the prior form of government when we had a city manager, I always went through the city manager to have a conversation with any city employee or department head or director. So there may have been some other council members by virtue of their long-standing tenure may have had that kind of access, but that's something that I would have never thought of doing. And in the corporate world, you don't jump over. There is a chain of command that one follows to get information. And I am a believer in that, following a chain of command, and that I have concerns that that these rules could be abused. If you have someone that's not going to self-regulate their communications with department heads or directors, and given that you had a lot of new council members that had no background or experience with the city government, I would hate to be the service director that would constantly be besieged with people trying to obtain and seek information on the spur of the moment. And I can understand how there was a thirst for knowledge. But it takes time to get the knowledge that I believe that you need to serve as a council member, and it took the mayor time to get the knowledge that he needs to run this government. And
Is there a training element, though, to the to achieve better understanding on the part of both the executive branch and the legislative branch as to what their respective roles and responsibilities are?
This is it's on the job learning. I believe that is how you acquire the knowledge that that this job entails. You can, you know, have your book learning or take your classes or go to your seminars, but, and I think this is true for, you know, as a lawyer, you know, what skills did you have when you first started practicing law? You had some theory, but until you actually started doing the job. And it took some time to gain some knowledge and expertise. And that's the same thing that happens with being a council member.
Well, but it seems inefficient to have it totally be learn as you go, as opposed to having some orientation that helps people to understand this is a normal way to proceed, this is a normal amount of information you could expect, this is when you should ask for information from a department versus this is when you should use the city council's budget to get a consultant and figure this out otherwise. As opposed to just having 6 or 7 people all trying to learn it on their own. That doesn't seem helpful.
So, yeah, let me back up in terms of going back to my original idea about taking some time to obtain some knowledge and some information. If you look at our budget hearing process this year versus last year, you can see the growth in all of the city council members and their knowledge about the city and knowing the questions to ask. Now, where did they get that knowledge from? I mean, I'm sort of throwing that out as a query. They got it from being on the job a while, and they got it from having some contact with some city department heads who do often come to our meetings when there's legislation to explain the legislation and to answer questions about it.
Gail did mention last night that she felt the budgeting process really had made a difference, that it's improving. So she also is noticing the learning curve that is happening through the budgeting hearings. We are concerned, though, that if there isn't a minimal amount of even just the ethics of elected office about conflict of interest and open meeting laws and that sort of thing, and then also a little bit of parliamentary procedure, just like as a starter kit to help people realize that this is not like just sitting and talking to other people, that there are real, you know, legal constraints on behavior and that sort of thing. We think that some of that might be a good thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm following that.
Okay, and so for when I was elected back in Oregon,
Right.
newly elected official, we were required to take a conflict of interest class and get a certificate on that, so that my husband, that sort of thing,
Right.
that sort of thing. We were also required to take open meeting law training.
Yes.
And basically, the Oregon League of Cities presented a day-long seminar on, as a newly elected official, here's some of the things you're going to be
Right.
learning, you know.
Yeah.
And it was very helpful because we realized that, whoa, there's a lot that goes on in being elected that isn't like regular life.
Yeah.
And something like that, I think, my experience was it was really, really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that's something that I would do by a charter provision addressing, you know, the general ethics of elected officials and employees would be beneficial. But in terms of, you know, for the council members, we are required to take the Sunshine Law course for every time that you are elected into office. And we are required to fill an ethics disclosure statement out every year. And presumably, I'd like to think that council members have gone through all of the ethics rules and requirements. And there is online Sunshine Law. It's a 3-hour course by the Attorney General's office. And I sat through an online ethics course as well. So there's that information that is there for council members. To me, that is something that, you know, the law imposes or requires us to do, regardless of whether we have an ethics provision in the charter or we have a city ordinance or we have a city council rule that says new members shall, within 30 days of taking office, have sat through the Sunshine Law requirement and sat through the ethics course.
Would it be your legal counsel who says, by the way, you need to to get this done now that you're elected to a city councilor? Who reminds you, or what's the enforcement?
That's a good question. I don't know how I knew that I needed to do it.
So at least at that aspect of it, we need to put it out there that somehow newly elected council members need to get this information about their expectations on this.
Yeah. And I know one way for sure that we would have known about it is we got an email from the clerk many months ago asking us when we had taken the Sunshine Law class. And if you don't file the ethics statement, you're going to get a notice of violation from the state, letting you know that you need to do it or you're subject to being fined.
Anybody on the screen have a question or a comment you'd like to make? Harriet?
Just, just interested by the training aspect relating to kind of the right of inquiry. If just the learning on the job that you're talking about does seem to some level like you can't get training for that, but also it seems like maybe it could be worth putting into place.
So let me, this right of inquiry. So imagine with the incidents that have been going on in Cleveland Heights in the first of the year, that if every council member was calling the chief of police wanting information because of constituent concerns or constituent calls, or that every council member is calling the service director every time there's a heavy snowfall wanting information. When are you going to get to this street? When are you going to take care of that pothole? And I have concerns about that kind of behavior occurring. And I'm not speaking that that's in Cleveland Heights, but that would be true for any municipality. If every council member is calling with those kind of issues or concerns that we all get the phone calls and the emails and the complaints about. And trust me, I believe that would be happening.
Well, with all due respect, it seems to me that's preferable to having thousands of citizen calls on a big snowstorm or after a murder's taken place. It seems like city council people could be the funnels for information. So to divert calls to the chief of police, to the chief of police and the service director, that seems like an actual preferable situation to thousands of citizens calls. People are directed to call their council member or a council member.
I think one difference is, and again, just referring to my experience, we were told that as an elected official, you have a lot more weight when you ask for something. You have to be sure that you are not putting city staff in an awkward position, having to say, I'll have to get back to you, or I can't answer that sort of thing. So it may seem like it's more efficient to have city councilors calling the chief of police, but there's a power dynamic there that is easy to abuse without thinking about it. The chief of police may spend more time thinking about, how do I answer this particular city councilor, because I'm under sort of, I'm in the crosshairs here, rather than being able to deal with whatever is going on in the city.
And all of these department heads and the chief of police, they all answer to the mayor. And I can understand that chief executive, should typically be one voice. There should be consistent information that's being given out. And there needs to be some, control is too strong a word, but there needs to be some consistency. And there needs to be, again, I believe you should be going through a chain of command to make sure that consistent information is being delivered.
But
Graham or Stephanie, do you have anything further you want to say, or Harriet? Jonathan?
So a question I have, you mentioned that the charter should be modified to require council approval for hiring of the directors. So you think that council should hire the directors but then not interfere? Okay.
No, thank you. That is one change that I did mention, that it differs from the current situation. Right now, city council approves only the finance director, the planning director, and the law director. The other department head directors, I do believe, should be subject to city council approval. The mayor hires them, but I do believe that city council should approve those positions to make sure that we're satisfied that qualified applicants are being hired versus political hires with no experience. So for example, I wouldn't want a planning director hired simply because they were a contributor or a friend of, I'm just speaking in theory, of the mayor, or was their campaign manager or something like that.
I was gonna ask the same thing. So basically you would want council approval of all department heads that the mayor is hiring.
Yes. So in that regard, that is one thing, strengthening city council's powers and the checks and balances, that I don't know what was unique about those three positions when this charter came about versus the others. I would say after the chief of police, your service director may be the most important department head in this city.
It's possible that in the case of other departments, those would have all been established by ordinance, and the ordinance could have said that the hire would be subject to city council approval. And it didn't,
I don't know.
but it could have. And it's an interesting issue, because if you provide that all department heads have to be approved, and the mayor has the authority to kind of switch around duties and organizations of each department, he could minimize the number of directors that are subject to city council approval. Consolidate departments, so you only have, a fewer number of directors. But in relationship to that, though, we also had a question about whether appointing people to city commission should be changed so that those are made consistent, and you said you didn't think that should be changed. So for instance, the mayor appoints the civil service commission, subject to city council approval, and city council appoints the planning commission.
Yeah, these are vestiges of the old city manager form of government, and I understand that the mayor favors an appointment process that's subject to city council. I am comfortable with the current setup where council does make the appointments to the planning commission, the architectural review board, which are the quasi-legal boards that actually have some power and authority, and the board of zoning appeals. And I believe those are also compensated, a nominal compensated amount.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask about that because I knew that the mayor had expressed an opinion about that, and I thought it would only be fair to ask about that if we were asking about some of these other changes.
And the reality is it's at this time, it is going a bridge too far, I believe, to try and make those kind of changes.
So could you just briefly talk about what your thoughts are? You said you weren't in favor of a system of electing city council or hybrid system, but could you talk for a minute about why you feel that way, just so we get your input on that?
I favor a system where all of the council members are working in the best interests of every part of this city. And my concern is if you start to break things up into wards, when it comes time for the allocation of resources and finances, then you're going to have those council members that have wards will want their wards taken care of. So when we did the allocations for the ARPA money as occurred, I believe, in Cleveland, and on the county level, those ward leaders or those county council district members, they wanted funds to expend in their own wards. And I don't believe that is the best form of government. And right now, we have got a pretty good geographic representation going throughout this city.
We seem to be seeing people on the city council elected at large, but are focused on particular neighborhoods or regions almost exclusively. So we're getting the worst of both worlds in that sense, kind of a thing. It may be just still the learning curve, but it's like a lot of times what we're hearing is, no, that's not favoring my neighborhood, so I'm going to vote against it.
That has not been my perception. I believe, if anything, the Noble Mayfield neighborhood is got most of city council's attention, and the realization that at least the people there have the belief that they're not getting their fair share of resources or city services. I don't know that I agree with that. There are reasons why that neighborhood struggles from a financial standpoint, and I believe that city leaders and council members, we do a poor job of explaining the economic reasons for that, or if we do, people don't want to accept the economic realities of that.
Anybody have any other questions?
I just have
Greg?
one question. You also indicate you're not interested in ranked choice voting. Can I ask, and I understand because there's not a lot of support for it so far that we've heard, okay? But can I ask you, how thoroughly do you understand ranked choice voting and the implications and the reasons why Maine and Alaska wouldn't have that as their way of doing it?
Yeah.
Because is it an information issue? Or is it I really truly understand this deeply and I just don't like it, here's the reason why I don't like it?
I had read through it at one time, and it just, and I failed to grasp the concept of it. But when, for example, in our most recent council elections, where you have 8 people, I don't know if it was 8, vying for 3 or 4 council seats, the voters are essentially, they're picking their top 4 candidates. I don't know how a ranked choice system would work without confusing the voters when they were picking from 8 candidates to fill 3 or 4 slots. I don't know that they would fully understand it. I know I wouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
We're a little over time, but I do want to ask about the use of emergency measures. There's been quite a lot of online chatter that
Yes.
seems to be abused, but I don't know how you would get something through council in an expeditious fashion without that. So it's like there seems to be emergency or 3 hearings and no middle ground.
I know we discussed that in the last charter review and sort of punted on it, other than highlighting that it is a concern for residents, because essentially, under the current state of Ohio law, city council doesn't really need to articulate a true emergency reason. They simply need to say that in the legislation. And then I understand there's a concern that emergency legislation is then not subject to the voters being able to change it if we pass it as an emergency legislation. But I don't believe that we abuse the use of emergency legislation in this city. Some may disagree with that. But there are a lot of things that simply, get to us at the last minute. It's unavoidable, and it's not just a Cleveland Heights issue. It happens in a lot of cities that there's so much going on that you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, there's a piece of legislation, the deadline is coming up and we've got to get it passed because somebody missed it or overlooked or You know, it got buried under paperwork in the law director's office, and the law director ultimately has to approve all the legislation. So things fall through the cracks.
I think maybe that's an area where there could be more public education about the function of that provision and why it's used and how it's used. But I think eliminating it could be problematic because there are situations where it is needed and you get into one of those legalistic tangles because there's law associated with emergency legislation. And if you just throw it all out, you could find yourself in a real pickle as a city, I think. But our law department probably could help us with that.
It's too bad it can't be called expedited rather than emergency because people keep saying, where's the emergency kind of thing? But it's like, there are times when you just need to expedite certain,
Yeah.
measures for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
But it may have to do with terms of art.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you.
Oh, my half an hour's up.
Yes.
Is Mr. Kuda following me?
Yes, he is.
Best I can.
Oh, you're gonna get a good contrast now tonight.
Well, we'll see. You could always watch the recording. Pour yourself a beer, get up some popcorn and
No, it's dry January.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the
You're welcome. Bye, everybody on Zoom. Mr. Kuda, I warmed that seat up for you. All right, bye, everyone. Have a good evening. And
Take
thank
care.
you all for your service. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
thank you. Step up to the table.
Waiting for the invite.
Yeah. So just in case you don't know everybody, we'll go around the table and introduce ourselves.
I'm Guy Thellian, and I'm in Delaware Bell Library. Waiting for everybody.
Hi, I'm Roland Anglin, and I live in Scarborough.
True Herzig on Bradford Road still.
Harriet?
Harriet Applegate, Crest Road.
I'm Graham, I'm on Bradford.
I'm Stephanie, this is Lily. I'm on Scarborough.
Jonathan Ciesla, I'm in Scarborough.
Greg Kluge on Stillman.
Linda Striyevsky, Delamere.
And do you know Lee? Because Gail
You know
didn't know Lee.
Yes, it's the moderator.
I do.
Okay.
We appreciate you coming to meet with us tonight. So the purpose of our meeting with city council people is so we can get your thoughts and input on things in the charter that we should think about changing or adding. And we appreciate you filling out our survey. So I guess to start out, you gave us a long list of things that you thought we should look at. And I guess I would like you to just tell us what you think are the top 2 or 3, so we can cover those first, and then we can do more as time permits.
Yeah, so, my approach on this whole thing is to make sure that the branches of government are fully empowered to do their job. And I think it's pretty clear what the legislative role is and what the executive role is. And then the question I ask is, so that would be my top priority, is to make sure that the legislative branch, because I do believe the executive branch is fully empowered to do its job. I want to make sure the legislative branch is fully empowered to do its job. And that's why I authored the amendment to have the charter amendment to have the clerk work for council, because that was very important and has been very instrumental in the work that we've done the past 2 years in getting that work done. Then, of course, there's inquiry, which we've talked about. That needs to be clarified so that it's very clear that the timely information that council needs to make decisions about legislation, we both review legislation and we sometimes create legislation. And in order to do that competently, we need information right now. And we don't always get it, and it has to be timely because we get council, routinely, what we do is we get a council packet on a Friday night when it's dark. That's when we usually get it. And then Monday, we have a meeting. So the question is, how are you going to receive that information and make a good decision on a Monday? So that would be number two. And then I would put a tie for a few others. And I can put meat on the bones of any of the plethora of, and by the way, if you don't want me to get into some of this stuff, I will gladly write you.
Yeah, we'll see how long people wanna go here tonight. But let me just say that, we've talked already in the commission about the inquiry issue, and we've, asked in the survey about it, obviously. And one of the things that we've had a little bit of conversation around, including with the other city council people who've come to talk to us already, is, what's appropriate to put in the charter about that, as opposed to it being addressed in an ordinance or, in some other way. Because the charter doesn't seem to be the appropriate place for very granular kinds of provisions. And we know that there have been a couple of different protocols in place. Until recently, there was a memorandum of understanding that had a certain set of procedures, and now that's not in force any longer, so there's a different procedure in place now. So the fact that those things change so quickly illustrates that stuff needs to be flexible. Things may be planned and people may think they're gonna help, but then they don't, so it should switch to something else. So the question then becomes, what really would be suitable for the charter to address that?
And I completely agree with you. The granular, it's unnecessary in the charter. I think one of the things that it says in the charter, and I have the language in front of me, is and I've asked two statewide municipal lawyers about this. We have an according to our charter right now, according to these experts, we have an unqualified right to information. In other words, there is no restriction, there's no restrictive language in there about asking. But it doesn't say we have to get answers or, we gotta ask all the questions we want. So I think if it could be made clear that timeliness and both that we have a right to ask questions and get answers, I think that's, I think that would be helpful. Just anything that could be, I don't want there to be anything that's a loophole in the language in the charter. And then, yes, it could be taken care of as far as how and when and, the logistics of it could be taken care of in an ordinance.
One of the interesting things that came up in another interview was that cities that are under a male form of government don't have any measure of right of inquiry. Like Beechwood, I believe, was brought up.
Nobody that I looked at has it. Shaker doesn't, South Euclid doesn't, Lakewood doesn't, University Heights doesn't. None of them have anything in their charter like what's in our charter. And the language in our charter, I think, is a fossil from city manager days. Because it doesn't seem to be in the other charters that we've looked at. And we haven't looked at every one in the universe.
Right.
We've looked at 4.
So here's Beechwood. Article 3, Section 5, the requirement that the directors and the city employees attend council meetings when requested to attend by council and participate in all discussions relating to their respective departments. So that is codified.
Yeah.
And then as far as the inquiry goes, specifically, I asked the council president, they get their packets, they also have council meetings on Monday. They do it by practice. The mayor and the council have agreed that council members can call and meet with private, I'm talking about privately, with directors with questions. And the purpose, and so their format is council gets their packet on Wednesday, Wednesday. And their meetings are on Monday. Thursday and Friday, council members can call and do call. And they do it by practice. I have to tell you, probably the best thing to do is I just believe the best thing to do in government is have it in writing. You know, and I'm not here to debate what should be in the, well, I might debate some things, but I'm not gonna debate you on what should be in the charter. That's your job, and you know, we'll decide, I guess, what ought to be in the ordinances. But I do believe it ought to be written down.
Well, I think it's interesting because when you mentioned that you get your packets on Friday towards the end of the day for a Monday meeting, I mean, that suggests to me a system where you're on your own.
Yeah.
Because Mondays, you've got meetings all day long, so you don't really have time Monday to do that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Right.
So, you know, one solution may be to change the protocol so that stuff has to be prepared sooner. And I realize, having been a lawyer, that's not easy, but I don't know, it seems like you gotta give people a reasonable opportunity to read legislation if they're gonna be considering it on a Monday.
Well, that is something in the purview of council.
Yeah,
So, you know, that whole timing thing, I'm just talking about one of the reasons we need information. You know, you're talking about emergencies a few minutes ago. I mean, the biggest problem is not that we have, you know, last minute things in a hurry. The biggest problem is we can't get information that we need in a timely manner to address something that comes late. And that's what we need, you know, however that happens.
so the current system that's in place by which you can email a director with a copy to the mayor, which I think is nothing unreasonable about that, but that's not getting you information on Monday.
No, I would say about the quickest it ever happens is 8 to 10 days. That's about the quickest, but I will tell you, I mean, you don't wanna hear the whole history, but we've had a lot of trouble with just getting any response at all. It's gotten better the last few months, it's been better.
Can you just give us a flavor for what some of the questions might be? Because I mean, in my job, if I get a request, if it's a simple request, I can respond in 24 hours. If it's a huge request, maybe it takes a week.
Yeah,
What kind of information
I
do you
think
look for?
the lead safe legislation is a real good example for this discussion. It was a long omnibus kind of package of information, and it had a lot of aspects to it.
This was proposed legislation?
It's legislation that passed, but it was also legislation that had a lot of questions. You know, and it kind of hung around for a few months. And so there was a lot of those opportunities for exchanges. And you know, we had trouble with just getting a response at all. But a typical question would be, okay, so we called Rochester, New York, because they've had lead safe legislation for 16 years. And we spoke with them, okay, and we found out their fines were completely different for non-compliance than our fines. I mean, night and day. I'm not talking about there was $100 more or something. Our fines were $150 a day. Theirs were $300 a month. Wow. You know, so a typical question would be, why are we doing this when another city with like and similar circumstances is doing something that's thousands, like tens of thousands of difference, you know? Why are we holding the tenant responsible for something when, you know, another city? So that would be, it's always about the legislation.
See, and as a government worker, if you called me on Monday with your meeting, you want me to drop everything else for everyone else. There's like that initial feeling, because I may not know that off the top of my head. So you also need time. So it does sound like there's timing issues of okay, here are some questions, or here's a list of questions. Cool, let me see what I can get through. But if there's no time to do that, you're either gonna get no response or something that could potentially be wrong or fluffy. So yeah, it sounds like there's not much room to actually discuss things.
So most questions that I would ask, I can't speak for others. Most questions that I would ask are, the answers could be in a short exchange, 2-3 minutes. Most of the questions.
Well, like the example you gave just of the fees or whatever, it's gonna be, that's interesting. I have no idea what, you know, so I have to call or blah, blah. So would you get and stuff like that? Like, let me get some context.
Well, here's,
Yeah, I think number of questions, are easy to answer. It's like we have X, Y, Z numbers here kind of thing. But why questions? Like, why are we doing this? That takes a long time, and it's like you have to figure out, I mean, you're right saying, I'm new here, I have no idea why the city is doing this kind of thing. I'm gonna have to talk to somebody and go to somebody else and find somebody else, and there may be no answer except that we always trim the pot roast because the pan was that big in my grandmother's house.
and the answer, we always could say, hey, you know what, we just can't vote on this. Because we didn't get, we don't have enough, and I understand that's always an option. I will tell you, as a legislator, as a person who sat there for 2 years, there's often pressure to get something done. Often. It's not occasionally, it's most of the time.
It's still wasn't responding to why questions take longer to answer.
Correct.
Because they are systemic questions that somebody may or may not have the answer to. So that may be why it takes so. Sorry, Greg.
I was just gonna say, but those questions are going to directors. I mean, you're not going to the people in the clerk's office or something might not know those answers. Those are people, directors and above,
Yeah.
that should know those
Right.
answers. Ellen Butler's been there for 20 years. If
And
you
we
don't know
could
the
always-
answer in 2 seconds, there's an issue.
We could always go to legal too,
Right.
and they'll, there's somebody that'll make a call. But, there's so much stuff that comes our way, and we just wanna be as prepared and as knowledgeable as we can be. And going on the internet is not always the answer. Sometimes we need to talk to the directors. And I've actually gotten that in. I bring that up because that was, hey, we live in the, no, that's not the answer. Usually that's not the answer. I already know I can go on the internet.
Councilman,
Yes,
I have a question. Early on, say the first year, before the sort of the clampdown about information sharing took place, the alleged reason for clamping down was that there were too many questions from council people, and again, the questions that they could find the answer out otherwise. Can you speak to that? Because you hear that over and over again. I heard it over and over again, and I'd like to have your take on what was the case before there was a clampdown on access to information from council members to the department heads.
well, just so you know, there was never what I would call a clampdown. There was just a kind of system put in place, and it was email only. And then there was a study done by the mayor's assistant, 744 emails were sent out between January 3rd of 2022 and August of 2022. And most of them the vast majority were never answered. So there was never a time when, where we used to get answers and then we didn't. We just kind of see, again, when you just relegate it to emails and then the emails aren't answered, then you're just out of luck. I have examined this policy thoroughly in Cuyahoga County. I can give you scores of governments that all allow meetings with directors by the council people, regular. I mean regular, I don't mean monthly, but like quarterly or so forth, and phone calls and texts, where email is not the only mode of communication.
Right, but the urban legend, I think what Harriet's going to is that the urban legend is that the mayor put in place a policy that directors weren't supposed to talk to members of city council without checking first with him, because city council people were asking too many questions or imposing too much on the time of directors. So is there any truth to that, or is that just an urban legend?
I have no way of knowing that. I really don't. That there was ever such a conversation. I can tell you that we've asked if we could meet with directors privately, and the answer's been no. That I can tell you. That has been directly asked and answered.
No, but the question is whether a flood of requests for information at the very beginning of the terms was what let the mayor say, wait a minute, I haven't even gotten into my job. I haven't even sat down with all these directors yet. You gotta slow down and let me get my feet on the ground before you start peppering my directors with answers. answers.
With
Not
questions,
true?
yeah.
Yeah, with questions.
I know that we did ask questions right out of the gate, like people do with a new job. We met with the directors for the first time in June. We were seated in January, and at the end of June of 2022 was the first time we sat down, and we sat down collectively with the directors. I would just say when people get a new job, usually they're onboarded before 6 months, you know, and that was, I consider the meeting with directors to be a part of onboarding with if you're a legislator, you know, that would be part of your onboarding. That would come on. I think this should be done, my opinion, obviously that's what I'm giving you, is this kind of stuff should be done between the time you're hired and the time you take office. But that's what I've seen government transitions do. But,
So
you know,
what about your experience with the flow of information, for instance, for committee work, or you're working on a project in your committee and you want input from a department? Are you getting flow of information there?
sometimes. I'd say that's about 50-50. So if like, for instance, I was chair of the housing committee, I'd say about 50% of the time when I asked for something, like if I asked, you know, for Alan Butler to come, you know, he could be there some of the times. And the email thing was not 50-50, it was maybe 80-90% of the time, I just would never hear anything back.
And to me, that leads to a why question, is there understaffing on the administrative side? Or, I mean, I'm assuming they're not just saying, we're gonna be nasty and not reply to 90% of emails. There must be some function there that is saying, and again, we're going to be asking the mayor about that soon, but I have to say, what's going on in the executive branch where they seem to be unable, because it's not just the city council, you hear a lot of social media about, I put in a call and I haven't heard back. If it's lack of staffing, then that can be addressed. I find it hard to believe that it's just they've all decided to be nasty to everybody.
I don't think I or any other members, I've never heard any members say that. But to address your question, that very thing came up last month when we were signing off on the budget. There was a department, just for the sake of this conversation, I'll just leave it at, there was a department that was we were getting a particularly large amount of emails about non-responsiveness. And my question during the budget hearings was, is this a staffing issue? Because we're willing to fund a customer service person for this important, you know, and the answer was no. And then, is it a training problem? So remember Craig Cobb, I wish I would have known, because he could have spoke to this, because he was speaking specifically to that. Is it a training? Because we'll fund, if you need funding for training, we'll do that. And then the answer was, well, we have training for all the staff when it comes to customer service. But there was a misunderstanding, as I recall, that we were speaking about the way people respond, because the answer was, one of the answers was by one of the staff members was, people don't always get the answer they want. And I had to stop the proceedings. And say, that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who call and never get a return call, answer, or an email that goes. We're not talking about, we didn't like the answer. A bad answer would have been a step in the right, you know, in other words, a step in the right direction. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I want you to know that I was very cognizant of that, because I don't want to say we were flush with money, but we had a decent budget this year. And that is something that I was willing to address. If just all they had to do was say yes. And we would have said, I can't speak for the other. But I think there was an appetite on council to satisfy that, scratch that itch.
Interesting.
Anybody on the screen have a question?
You have on your list of topics, access or council access to the law director as separate from right of inquiry. Do you see those two, like, do you see that the law department requires a specific thing to address it?
So let's go back to Beechwood just for a second. In Beechwood, the council hires the law director, and the law director works at the pleasure of the council. You know, I certainly wouldn't say that that's what we need to do here, but what isn't clear to me is if the mayor hires the law director, what is council's right to, the time we need for access to the law director? Because there are times when council members, and I can say this is evident, we just don't have the time. And I just want to say one more caveat to that. I want everybody who's listening to understand that I know, again, not speaking for other council, I am completely of the mind that in every municipality, the vast majority of legislation is going to come from the administration. Totally get that, okay? But everybody who runs for city council, I'm gonna make a blanket statement that's gonna be mostly true, is there to do something. They ran because they care about the parks or something. And they're gonna come up with an idea or two while they're on council. And there's gonna be a time when they're gonna wanna go and say, hey, here's my, and they just need some time. And I don't know so Graham, I'm not sure if there's something that needs to be specifically worded, but it's just something I think that's worth looking at, that council's access to the law director is important.
Well, it's interesting,
And the law department.
when I saw that in your list, I looked at our collection of charters. And I found that in Lakewood and South Euclid, both charters basically describe the role of the law director as chief legal advisor to city council, the mayor, all boards, commissions, etc. So our charter doesn't say that. It doesn't say that they're serving as chief counsel to the city council as well as the mayor, etc. So those two communities have similar language. University Heights doesn't address it, Shaker Heights doesn't address it. I didn't look at Beechwood. But it's just kind of interesting to me. And I don't know to what extent access to the law director is also a function of budget or, allocation of council's budget to a certain number of hours for law director time. Because I don't know if there's, I'm assuming the law director's on some kind of a retainer, but there's probably some hourly rate thing on top of the retainer.
And then if they go above the hours, it's more.
So are we contracting it or we actually hire the person?
Well, you're on staff, right?
Yeah.
You work for the city, right?
Yeah, I'm full-time, the law director is part-time.
Right, so the law director is typically under a retainer agreement, in Cleveland Heights anyway, a retainer agreement, and so they get paid a certain amount of money.
Yeah, that makes sense now, but there's enough work to do on the administrative and the legislative, why not push for a full-time?
Well, I suspect that, I haven't worked in that sector, so I'm not 100% sure, Craig, you may have a sense of this, but I think it probably has to do with the fact that there could be some benefit to having a law director who's got experience working in multiple municipalities because they have a broad range of experience and they can bring best practices. Not that any would get in the rut of not keeping on top of things, but I suspect that's probably.
Well, having heard what you just said, I would say that every legislative body, again, should have a codified right to, I don't think it should be ambiguous. I would.
Yeah, but I suspect it probably has something to do also with budget and how the law department's time gets allocated and.
Well, that's one issue, but again, I think it should be clear in the charter that council has access.
And I think that's also in the contract with the law director. I mean, that's part of the job description. It's like, is the law director required to respond or not kind of thing? Because if at their end, they are told, no, you just, you wait for your assignments and you do with them and then you report back kind of thing, you don't answer phone calls, then that could be just basically the job description.
Well, let me be clear, the law department responds. It's just, A, do they have the time? And that's not a charter issue.
Right.
But B, I would love to see the obligation be there, in the charter. The obligation needs to be there.
Well, you're talking about just this statement that they do represent city council.
Yes, absolutely. That's, we're a legislative body. That shouldn't be left. That's not something you don't want to leave out.
Yeah, that part
To me, that's fundamental.
it's such a hard time not being a smart ass because it's like, it's legislation.
Yeah.
if you don't have a lawyer look at it, good luck, like.
It's like the clerk of,
Terrible idea to.
how about this one? The clerk of council should work for city council. That did not, for 100 years, we had a clerk of council that didn't work for city council. I just,
We resolved that one though, so
yes, we
that's
did.
good. So who else wants to raise a topic that we haven't covered yet, just so we respect everybody's time?
Yep.
Harriet, you have anything? Harriet's not saying anything, so I'm assuming,
Graham?
Did you, I didn't hear,
did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
I asked my question.
Okay, so I have a question. You also mentioned the role and election of president of council, so what are you looking to change there?
nothing on reflection.
Okay. All right.
I think he had a question.
Yeah, I have a question. So, my question relates to the culture. It's a new organization, it's a new, we have a mayor for 2 years now, et cetera. Okay?
Sure.
A lot of the response that we can expect from I'll just speak hypothetically, of the executive department to requests from the legislative department, okay, is gonna come from a cultural aspect.
Right.
So the question is have we gotten to the point where there's a clear understanding of why people are in their jobs? So for example, a director may say, I'm the director, director of
Parks.
who takes care of roads? I'm sorry. Public services. Okay, so you got a public service director, okay? And the public service director hypothetically could have the attitude about his job, his or her job, saying, I fix holes in the road. That's what I do. I do a good job of that, I've done a good job.
Yeah.
All right, as opposed to saying, there's 40,000 people in this city and they need support. So how do I provide the right level of support in the right way so they understand that they're getting what they need, et cetera. Okay, so there's a cultural aspect to this as well. And one of the things that I get is that if you have the executive department saying, no, directors, you can't talk to council. It's like culturally, that's like, wow, wait a minute, where's the openness? Where's any kind of transparency? Where's any kind of willingness to be supportive of what the city needs in order to do the work? And I'm not picking on the executive department, please don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that there's a cultural aspect there that's missing. We're all here supposedly to have a good experience for residents. We want people to like living in Cleveland Heights, I think.
So for the purposes of this particular meeting that we're having right now, I don't concern myself with the cultural aspects. The only thing I look at is, what do we need codified in the charter so that we have co-equal branches of government? Co-equal doesn't mean that we're equal. It means simply that both branches are empowered to do their jobs. And if that's all I think about, and right now, I don't think council is fully empowered to do its job. In the charter, every government has to deal with the cultural aspects. In other words, the personalities and the mixture and the way, and that's life. I mean, everybody who has a job, I worked at Shaker Heights High School, that had a culture, but we also, so I'm just concerned with that. I mean, I do appreciate what you're saying, and it does put a context there, but I would just like the language to be clear so that we can make ordinances that fit underneath that framework that makes sense so that everybody can do their job. That's all I'm concerned about. I don't want to step on anybody else's toes. I don't want to overreach, but I don't want to underreach. I don't want to go into meetings without the information I need. And if some mayors need it written down, and we're talking about we're trying to make a document for the ages. If some mayors need it written down, this is what I have to do with the staff so that the legislative branch can do that, then so be it. And enough people think it's important that they do put it in their charters and others don't, I guess.
The main takeaway, and certainly not the only, but getting an agenda packet late Friday for a meeting on Monday is completely stupid. That gives you, that shoots your weekend, and it's like on a weekend, nobody's gonna answer the phone anyhow, so there has to be a way to get your agenda packet much
We
earlier.
get our agendas out on Monday for a Wednesday meeting, and we're not doing anywhere near the amount of work you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, who sets that deadline?
City council.
Okay.
I mean, in conjunction with the law department and so forth.
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
to move the
And the
deadline.
administration, yeah. I mean, I appreciate that, and
No, I know it sounds simple, but it's like,
I'm just telling you how things have run since not just since I've been on council, but since I've been, kind of watching council. I know, are you gonna kick me out pretty soon?
Well, we have a little bit more time.
Because I do have I have a couple other things that I wanted to address. And get my glasses. And they were in the questions here. Letter E under number 2E, the method of filling vacancies on city council. Okay, so I think the method that we use is pretty good, with the interviews and so forth. But I think 60 days would be better than 45, just because doing 45, I wouldn't want to cut out the 2 weeks that it takes to get applications. And I wouldn't want to cut out the 2 weeks that it takes for the League of Women Voters. I mean, I know not everybody does this, but I like it. And I wouldn't want to cut out the deliberation time and the interviews of the, when we narrow it down to, 3 or 4 or 5, so 60 days would be nice. Council president, there's most cities have the mayor, if you can't get an agreement, the mayor appoints.
Right.
I don't think that's the right way to go. I don't think that I think the separation of powers, that this is purely a legislative duty, should ever go to the executive branch.
Why do you suppose the other charters have it as the mayor, though? Because I did look at our samples again, and they all provide for the mayor to do it.
Not all. There were.
Well, the 4 that I looked at.
Oh, okay. Because we had about 3 dozen, and I'd say 6 or 7 had the council president doing it. I think the mayor is supposed to be like the nuclear, like, oh my God, we don't want that, we won't do that. The reason why I think it's better if it's the council president is because what you don't want is the mayor tipping the balance of power on the council. That is, in what that person perceives is in their favor. Now, the council president usually should be, and I certainly plan to as council president, but all council presidents should be working with the mayor. But if the council can't come up with a 45 days or 60 days or whatever it is, then I do think that the person that's been entrusted to lead the council is the better person to make that choice in, not only in the best interest of the city, but obviously, to bring in somebody that can work with that council. That's what you want. You want council to choose somebody that's going to fit in.
My concern about that is if the council, after 60 days, can't pick somebody, then whoever's going to do the choice is going to be in the crosshairs in a sense. And I thought they moved it over to the mayor so that the council president does not have to take that burden and face opposition from the fellow councilors. So the mayor gets the heat rather than the council president. Either way, it's going to be a little bit awkward because if you haven't agreed in 60 days, then obviously there are some entrenched positions that whoever makes the selection is going to be rubbing up against.
Right. I understand that. But you take a leadership role, you're just gonna, you just live with that. And then the last part, I think I put, I don't like the part that, and I said this actually at the time when they created this charter amendment. It's so impractical to have somebody run in an even numbered year if they're appointed close enough to the time. It's just too much to ask. You have a hard enough time finding people that are interested to do this.
Well, we apparently don't, because there were gazillions of people who wanted to be on council, so I.
But no, well, in this one time it was used, Gail Larson ran unopposed. But she didn't know that, so she had to do all the stuff,
Sure.
I don't think it's practical.
Well, it's interesting because I looked at the charters again, and a lot of them do, some of them go to the next municipal election, some of them go to the next general election. And I think the tension there is, do you want to let the voters decide as soon as possible, rather than have the appointment hold for a longer period of time? Or do you want to just wait till the next municipal election so it's all on cycle, and so you avoid some of these inconveniences of somebody having to run on a pretty short, what's the word I want? Sort of a short ramp up.
Yeah, Gil mentioned that as well, and it makes sense because to be treated just like a placeholder, it's like you're just gonna sit in that seat until the next election and then maybe you're out, but you're still expected to do all the work and learn all the stuff you need to do. It seems like that's a little bit harsh, particularly when democracy is a public service. I mean, people are volunteering their time to do this kind of thing, and to say, yeah, we'll let you in, but it's like you're gonna be having to run as soon as you get in, besides taking on all the responsibilities. I don't know if there's a dividing time, it's like if it's plus 1 year before the next whatever, or minus 1 year, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Some of the cities use 200 days. Or there are time periods that are used. It's interesting to look at the different provisions. Of course, you have to diagram the sentences to understand them. And that's a lost art.
Yeah.
Was there anything?
But we're definitely aware that is an issue, because it does seem unfair to people to say you just got in and immediately you're gonna have to start your re-election campaign.
Yeah.
So would you like to comment on the idea of switching to a different method of electing city council members?
Yeah, I would. So I've heard some of the arguments, for wards and a mixture. I don't think anybody said we ought to have all wards. I don't recall anybody saying that. But I have heard people say, why don't we have 4 or 5, maybe 4 or 5 wards and then 2 or 3 at large. And I do worry about the parochial nature of how that can become where you get people that only vote on things that benefit. And I do worry about that. But I do understand that it's hard for people to run citywide in a 45,000, in a city with a population of 45,000. It is a daunting task. I've run 2 elections in the last 4 years, and they were citywide. It's really difficult, and I get that. So I get the whole yin yang. One idea I had is that maybe everybody should be running in a slot, instead of this whole idea at large in a slot. So
does that help?
Please help us
there's
understand.
council person A, B, C, D, E, F, however you get to 7, and then when you run against a person. You don't run as the top 3 vote getters or 4 vote getters. You run in a slot. So you'll either be unopposed, maybe you're doing a good job, nobody runs against you. Somebody thinks you're not doing a good job, they run against that person. It's kind of done that way for judges, for what do you call it, county judges?
Common pleas.
Common pleas, yeah. There's just slots for every judgeship,
Yeah.
and you run in that slot. It's one thought I've had. I'm not saying I'm married to it, but it's something I thought has some merit.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because somebody else commented that if you have, so if you take our last election, we had 6 people running for 3 slots. It's sort of implementing ranked choice voting, kind of,
Yes.
because people are picking their top 3 choices, or their top 2 choices, or their top 1 choice, but I don't know, this running on slots thing is, I hadn't thought about that.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
How about ranked choice voting? How do you feel about that?
It's very confusing to me. I've had it explained. I thought there's a lot of contingencies. If somebody could come up with some methodology that I could understand.
Rank your beers at the Bottle House this month. So.
No,
Is that right?
I sat and listened for about a half an hour.
Yeah.
And I came up with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say no, but I
understand that, yeah.
I want to hear more.
Okay, anybody else have anything else you want to raise?
No.
We lost Harry.
Anybody on screen?
My understanding is then you're talking about like voting on individual seats for council,
Correct,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
So everybody would be kind of in a, they would be challenged personally as opposed to in a herd, yes. Not to be confrontational, but it's just, to me, it's just,
I mean, it is to be but what I mean by that is, it's to say, I don't agree with this particular person, how they're doing their job, so I'm going to run against them. But the other one's cool, so just let them go. I don't run against everybody all at once. I just pick off the ones I feel that aren't representing.
right, well,
Weak ones at the back of the pack.
but I'm not saying that it ought to be
Oh, yeah,
confrontational.
yeah.
I just mean that if there's a difference of opinion with the way somebody is doing their job,
Run
it
against,
could be just that simple.
yeah,
Yeah,
not run against them and then whoops, I knocked out somebody that I liked. Which could have happened with the last one because we picked three, so it was a gamble as to who you were
Yeah.
gonna get.
Yeah.
And only 3 people were gonna win,
Yeah.
we knew that.
Yeah,
But if I understand it correctly, in the slot election, that more than 2 people could run for that slot. Anybody who
Yeah,
wants
that's
to put
right.
their name in the ring for
That's
that
right.
particular seat A on the council could run.
That's right,
All right.
that's right.
So it doesn't have to be confrontational like head to head. It could be
No,
just like.
no, yeah.
Does that sort of clear that up, Stephanie, in a way? Okay.
Yeah, the minute she said seats, it clicked for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, just clarifying, I mean,
Yeah, the slot sounded like a horse race when you're in your.
Yeah, it's
Wait,
kinda
we
like
can
that.
bet on elections?
Yeah, oh yeah.
so just real quick, you had also made a comment about
too, so I'm making sure.
changing filing deadlines and signature requirements. So do you have particular numbers in mind for that, or you just think what we have isn't working?
I think the August filing deadline was better than the June, and I'll tell you why. Now that we have a mayoral form of government. I think sometimes candidates are gonna come from council. I mean, it kind of makes sense, you work your way through. If you file in June and the primary is in September, and that, just so you know, the primary is, I think, the second week in September. If you have to give up you're giving up your seat because you're filing for mayor. You can only file for one seat. But if it's in if the filing deadline is in August, then you can run, or you can throw your hat out there. And if you're not getting support, you just feel like, oh, you know what, I changed my mind, I don't want to do this. You can do that. In June, you're not going to know anything. The race, it's not even a race at that point. So that's what I was thinking, given that that the primary is the second week in September.
Okay.
It's just a thought that, that June filing deadline doesn't really work for a person on council.
Yeah, well, a couple of people mentioned that, but what about the number of signatures?
I like that it's more than 50, which
Yeah.
is some, but
So it's interesting, I did the research on that one too.
Yeah.
So Shaker has 2%, 2% and no, they don't seem to have a deadline stated, so maybe they're going with whatever the county requires on the Board of Elections. So South Euclid has 75 days with 150 signatures for wards and 300 for at-large, and
that's more than ours.
600 signatures for mayor. And University Heights has 3% of the voters in the last municipal election and 90 days.
And ours is 10% of the gubernatorial.
No, I think it's 2% of the people who voted in the last municipal election.
Come on, quick.
I happen to have my charter with me.
I want to say it's 10% of the last gubernatorial election. That's what stuck in my mind.
No, it's municipal, and I'm pretty sure it's 2%.
It couldn't be 10%, because now that I'm thinking, that would be over 1,000.
Yeah.
Oh, that's for, you know what that is? That's for
Recalls?
Recall.
not I don't know, maybe a recall, but if you want to put something on the ballot,
Yeah, initiative.
in the ballot initiative, sorry, yep. That's where that comes from.
2% of the total number of persons voting at the last regular municipal election.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I get the was mixed up because I've done both.
But if you had thoughts about the percentages for the other provisions, the referendum initiative, et cetera, you could, follow up and let us know what your thoughts are on
Okay.
that. Cause it's getting late.
And we're looking at that because it should be from the last significant election, not just a blanket, 10% of the whole electorate,
Right.
because that's crazy.
Right.
It's tied to municipal though in this case. Okay, anybody have anything else?
Thank you
Anything
for
you
all-
wanna say in closing?
Thanks for all the work you put into
Well,
this.
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we love talking to our city council people.
And the mayor.
It's
and
very
everyone.
helpful.
Yeah,
It's very helpful, no, because you guys are in the trenches, so we value your input and we're hoping we're gonna talk to everybody. I still have scheduled a few people, but folks have generally been responsive, so that's good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you, thanks for coming. Okay, so folks, I want to report that we will have distributed to you tomorrow the minutes for our last two standing meetings. I apologize, I didn't get them out to you today, but I had a word processing glitch. But we'll have those tomorrow. Does anyone have anything else for the good of the order?
Our next official meeting is January 24th. I was trying to figure.
Well, we probably will have another special meeting to talk to city council people on either the 18th, the 20th, or the 22nd. I'm trying to get people nailed down. I'm trying to get them as much as possible on the same day, so we don't have to have multiple meetings later in the month. So I'm hoping to get that sorted out in the next couple of days and get back to you on that. But thank you very much for your
I
patience on this.
just wanted to check to make sure that one is an official meeting.
Yeah, it is.
For that agenda, I've been drafting some suggestions for buckets, and I would like to put a bucket discussion on the agenda for the January 24th meeting, please. Since we talked about that last time.
Question, don't you mean the 17th?
No, it's not the 17th because we couldn't get the room that day.
Thank you,
Yeah,
okay, so
I went on the city calendar and found us on the 24th, but that's why I
great,
wanted to
because
confirm.
I would have shown up on the 24th and you never would have seen me on the, or I would have shown up on the 17th.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to bring it up. So the 24th is our next official thing, but we may fill in some dates with other interviews. That's what I wanted to find out.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah, there likely will be at least one.
That clear on the grid of Zoom? You guys got that?
No, I was wondering, like, with extra meetings and stuff and with things getting switched around, can we have meeting invites sent out?
Say what?
Meeting invites for calendars, digital meeting invites.
Does the city have that capability?
Yeah, I get it.
We will have to do as secretary.
It's gonna, for me,
Is it a
it'd be,
sunshine issue?
no, from me, it'd be an Outlook
Okay.
request though, so if somebody would rather have that in an email format or
I
something.
think Graham said he could do that.
Oh, okay.
What format do you use, Graham?
Google Calendar
Okay.
invites.
It's really a lot, it's kind of cumbersome to like dig through emails or make,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
I just think it's easier to have everything on a calendar.
That's why I was kind of freaking out this afternoon, so I went to the city calendar hoping that somebody would be there, and that's where I found the 24th kind of thing, so. Yeah, it's because our calendar's been in flux lately.
Yes, but I really appreciate your patience with all the extra meetings, but I don't really know how else we can
And
talk to all these people and do the other stuff we have to do.
the responses you've been getting about, I'll get back to you on some days, is not very helpful, so.
Well, I'm gently nudging, sending emails every other day seems to be having an effect, but it's wearing.
Did we say that our next meeting is the 18th?
Well, it's likely gonna be the 20th or the 22nd, but I'm still working with a couple of people to get them nailed down.
Got it.
Calendar is definitely
But the
January
doodle selections right now include the 18th, the 20th, and the 22nd.
We don't have our schedule.
But none of those have been scheduled yet. The 24th is firm, January 24th is a firm meeting. The others have not yet been
Okay.
scheduled.
Okay.
But you should
I will
hold them.
definitely not be available on the 20th, so. Just FYI,
Sure. We're gonna put that in the charter, though.
as long as it's clear.
Yes.
Did you have something?
Yeah, just one thing, Linda, you're preparing some kind of a flyer or something that we can ask Greg to get into one publication?
I already
We're gonna-
prepared it.
Okay, is there any chance that somebody could look at it before it's considered final?
Oh, sure, I can send it to you. Yeah, it's pretty
'Cause I just have
simple.
I know, but I just have a couple ideas, I just.
We're talking about the graphics for the flyer for the public presentation, that's what.
Can you
Yeah,
guys
I'll send it out.
use your G? Okay, then the speaker's picking it up,
All
good.
right, great.
Good.
Okay, so I do have one question, and this is just a hypothetical, but one of the things I thought was that if you're gonna put up a flyer, one thing that might be useful for people, helpful for people to participate, is to say, the members of the council are, okay, so that we would be listed as the members of the council, so they say, oh, I know so-and-so, I wanna go to that meeting. You know, that kind of thing, okay?
How about our little faces in starbursts around the outside, sorry, but.
Oh, that's okay, that's
I was
okay.
gonna say that, Drew, like, can we have little headshots?
Yeah, maybe that would work too,
I
okay.
was trying to have just a very clear, simple thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, I'm just saying that I'm trying to.
Well, we can add some text that lists the members.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll up
Okay,
Andy,
and
what
then-
about a QR code on the flyer to get more information? I mean, everybody's doing that now, I have no idea how to do that.
Oh, there's generators on the, you could add a QR code to
And
our
we would have to say
page.
what,
Yeah, where
just
does it
like
go
to take them to our archives?
Where does it go to?
No, I would
That's
send them
okay.
to the current page with all the minutes and everything.
Yeah, okay, and then the other thing is, I just raised again hypothetically, I think it would be helpful if there was a part of that said, if you have questions, want more information, you can call so-and-so. And
Well, we want them to go to the email.
Yes.
we want them to go to the email, what does that mean, I'm sorry?
We have an email address.
So send an email if you have a question, there's no one to call.
Yes, right.
Yeah, okay,
Operators
so
are
I'm
not
on-
standing by.
Okay, so I'm suggesting that I would not have a problem being the one who would be listed as,
I don't know that we wanna have people to start calling, I think it's gonna be a little bit hard to manage.
You won't be able to pull it back once you put it out.
Yeah.
And then they will have your number.
Yes.
I could get a Google Voice number, it wouldn't be necessarily my number.
That's, yeah.
I don't know, I think we're better to have them go to the email with questions and, cause we may get multiple questions that are the same thing and then we could do some FAQs and.
Or
I
show-
understand, the thing is that what we're saying is that everybody needs to have email, and they have to use email.
No, we all go to that one email and we
No, no,
can
I'm
all see
saying
the
No,
emails.
no, yeah, but or
No,
they
no, I
can
understand, but if
show
you-
up, yeah, he's talking
If
about
you're
access.
one who has a question, or if you want more information, or whatever,
Yeah,
then you're saying, okay, well then if you don't have email, you don't use email, you're not comfortable with email, you don't get, your voice isn't being heard.
yes,
I don't know, I just think it's kind of,
unless they physically show up to the meetings.
it's a slippery slope thing to start having people making phone calls.
I mean, we don't accept telegraph, so
You
it's an
can't
antiquated
telegraph
technology.
anymore, it's over.
Exactly.
Okay, we don't.
Yeah, so I'm saying, but if you don't use email in certain respects, sorry.
Okay, and I, just one more point on that. It's easy enough to turn a Google Voice on, it's also very easy to turn it off. So if it turns out to be something impractical, doesn't work, yada, 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 okay.
Could we set up a voicemail box at the city? It would take a while.
Something I could talk to IT about, a phone and a phone number not being used right now.
Well,
Harry is trying to get back on. Does she have to dial back in the same way she did before?
Are we
I
going to
mean,
adjourn?
yeah, are we motioning to adjourn?
well, Keith, it obviously is a concern of yours, if it's that easy to set up a Google voicemail box, I don't know about that kind of thing, but I'm not opposed to that, if you wanna make sure that we're extending access.
It's a matter of inclusion, okay, because
Yes,
if
yeah,
you
I
don't,
get
if
it.
you don't use the computer,
Right,
people are blind, people are, all kinds of things that interfere with that, so.
So I'm thinking, or wondering if we had a phone number at the city that wasn't being used and had a voicemail on it, transcriptions of those calls could be emailed if you wanted to listen to them.
well, I think it'd be easier for Guy to set up a Google Voice, because we put so much on you, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, Lee, as long as it's not against the rules, you know what I mean? I also recognize that, well, you're just establishing it for this purpose, but it's really, if it was described as one of the members of the council is available to answer your questions, yada, 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 and then that would be very clear, very simple. It's not an official organ of the city of Cleveland Heights. It's somebody who's on the council, who's talking to you, et cetera.
But do we create a new
There'll be-
public record?
There'll be public records.
Yeah, so you have to save them and download them. No, I mean.
Yeah,
we'll
that's
have to-
fine, it's not anything lost.
Yeah.
So what kind of record has to be maintained of phone calls?
No, in that case, you can download the MP3 files. You can give a thumb drive to
Does
the
Google
city.
do a transcription also?
Yeah, they do
a
transcription.
So I could also just do
You
a
can give the city the
transcription
logins. Yeah, there's a way you can
For
give
voicemails.
for voicemails.
If,
I'm sorry, yes.
if it's not illegal,
And it would be primarily voicemails, primarily, unless they tell me they wanna talk to me, I'll call them back.
if it's not illegal, then I would move to authorize Guy to set that up because it is an inclusion issue and it's of concern to him, and I don't think it'll disturb any of the rest of us.
But I would like to understand what the record keeping implications are. What do we have to know about record keeping for this?
I think I'll have to give you an answer.
Okay, why don't you check into that and let us know?
Okay, but you know, if there's a transcription made, it's just like an email, that's a record.
But that assumes everything's a voicemail.
No, in a
Right.
conversation, I could be the one responsible for
That won't create a record.
Sorry to raise big issues at the last minute.
But that's okay, so Guy, you're okay with where we're at the moment?
I would like to, again, for purposes of inclusion, I think it would be nice to have a phone number on there. If we could test it with this particular use, and if it works, great, and we might be able to use it again. If it doesn't work, if it turns out to a quagmire, or it just becomes a problem, guess what? There's no more voicemail.
Well, why don't you let us know
Okay.
what the issues might be? Maybe there aren't any issues, and
Hey, can you put it on the next agenda
Well,
or whenever we get together?
will that be enough time though? When is the flyer going out? I'll revise my motion. I move that if there are no legal objections discovered by Lee within this week, if that's giving you enough time, that Guy is authorized to set up a Google Voice, whatever kind of thing.
And have it listed on the flyer.
Yeah.
Or in publication.
Because we do want to get the flyer out. Is that an okay motion for tonight?
Does that timing work for you, Lee?
Yeah, it won't take me long to
Okay.
give you an answer on that.
So by the end of the week, we should know one way or the other. And once Lee confirms or denies kind of thing, then if we pass this motion, then Guy can go ahead and set it up.
what do you all think about that?
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Discussion.
I have some reservations. Is the intent to just transfer information to the public? Or just to give out information to the public?
No, it's the other way around. It's to offer the public an opportunity to ask a question or give information or declare a priority, declare an interest.
I think what Roland's getting at is exactly that point, that if it's one thing if somebody's calling to get clarification about the purpose of the meeting, but if somebody's calling to give input, we wanna make sure we're keeping good records of what's coming in.
Right.
And it's a much bigger job.
Yeah, you become the policy maker.
Well, I don't know. For me, it was, the design is that if they want more information about the meeting, that's where it would be. And if it's outside of the scope of that and it's an object, if that's a problem, then I can just simply treat it as something outside of the scope of what we've designed the process to be. And I can respond inviting them to attend a meeting. Please respond if that addresses your concern.
Well, yeah, it does address it, but there's a fine line between giving information and someone says, well, then tell me, what do you think about how the committee is doing?
I'm really good at saying I don't know.
No, but I think we have to have a clear understanding about what the scope of the communication flow is supposed to be. So that's a good point, Rob.
You just want a line that has a voicemail for people to leave comments. I think that's probably the easiest use of it. Just nobody answer it, just takes a voicemail, and that voicemail is forwarded on to the group.
Yeah, and you can do it. You can set it to do not disturb, so it'll never ring anywhere. If you did through Google
If
Voice.
somebody has a question about what the CRC is doing,
There's-
then they should call the law department and the chair.
So you'd end up kind of managing a switchboard, Guy, it sounds like. I'm not sure if that's.
Well, my assumption is it's not gonna be highly populated.
Yeah.
Okay, my assumption is there's not gonna be a lot of use of it. Okay, and that's why I said if it becomes overwhelming, then we would just have to say that it's not available.
Yeah, well, I think if it's limited to answering questions people have about the meeting, you know, when does it start, when do you think it's gonna be over, you know, whatever. But I don't really think it should get beyond that in this kind of communication flow. It just doesn't seem like a good way to have input coming in. But what do you all think?
I'm interested in a vote.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm interested in a vote.
If it's clear, so for more information about this particular public presentation, you know, not about the whole Charter Review Commission, but about this particular presentation, hopefully that'll,
Well, I'm more comfortable with it if it's that.
And that's fine, that's fine.
So can we amend the motion?
certainly, yeah, I would move that Guy be authorized to create a Google Voice, whatever kind of thing, that on the flyer will say, for more information about this public presentation, you are welcome to call or please call kind of thing. And that's based on if Lee finds that it is allowed by the city. Does that make sense for a motion?
Mm-hmm. We have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain.
Abstentions?
5 yes, 1 abstain, passes.
All right, thanks, Guy.
Yeah, we'll see.
thanks, Steve.
It's-
I like the concept, I just think it's difficult in operation.
It is, and I think this is a good test.
Yeah, he's willing to put himself out to see if it works or not.
Okay,
adjourn?
can we have a motion to adjourn?
Do adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think there's any discussion.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed?
All right, you all have.
Thank you all very much.
Here,